Okay, let's dig into this. You shared quite a bit of material, articles, some research, even your notes, and it paints this really interesting picture. Two big ideas for the future, almost. Yeah, almost competing.
That's right. We're looking at universal basic income, UBI, which I think a lot of people have heard about.
Sure.
And then this other concept, maybe a bit newer, universal basic intelligence, UBIQ.
Right, UBIQ. So the sources you sent really set up this debate.
Right.
Is it cash, or is it .code? Is it support, or is it tools?
Exactly. And the implications are, well, pretty surprising, according to this material, especially now with AI moving so fast.
Absolutely. And, this reminds me of the research we often look at from Kevin Brake. We've worked with his insights quite a bit, actually.
Oh, yeah. Good point.
He specifically flagged this. I have his quote here somewhere. Yeah, he said, "I see this being a real big issue related to AI in the future." His perspective always seems to really zero in on these key future trends.
It does. His work really resonates with what these sources are grappling with, the challenges, the opportunities.
Totally. So for this deep dive, our plan is to unpack all these sources you shared, find the key takeaways, compare UBI and UBIQ as they're presented here,
Understand the potential impacts based on the research.
and figure out what's most important, specifically for you, the listener. Ready to jump in?
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's start with maybe the newer idea for some folks. Universal Basic Intelligence, UBIQ. How do the sources describe that?
At its core, it's really about making powerful AI tools accessible to everyone. Like imagine everybody getting free access to something like ChatGPT.
Free access.
And it's not just a thought experiment in this material. Your sources actually point to the United Arab Emirates. They're reportedly the first country doing this.
Doing what, exactly?
Offering free ChatGPT Plus subscriptions to all residents.
Wow, okay. ChatGPT Plus, that's normally what, like $20 a month?
Yeah, exactly. And the Times of India apparently reported this back on November 8th, 2024. So it's a real-world step.
That's a pretty concrete example.
Yeah.
So what's the rationale? According to the sources, why are they doing this? Is it like welfare?
That's the interesting part. The sources frame it very differently. Not as welfare, but more like an investment. A bet, really.
A bet on what?
A bet that giving people these AI tools will spark innovation, boost education, drive economic growth. The idea is to level the playing field.
Level the playing field with AI tools.
Yeah, the logic presented in the material is that people don't just want handouts. They want tools. Tools to create, to solve problems.
Ah, okay. I think I saw an analogy in there. Something about ladders.
Exactly. That's the one. It's like handing out ladders instead of cushions, giving people the means to climb, to build, not just sit comfortably.
Ladders, not cushions. Got it.
Yeah.
That's a pretty clear image.
And that image, that contrast, naturally leads the sources into discussing the other side of the coin, universal basic income, UBI.
Right, the more familiar concept. So quickly, the material presents UBI as just regular cash payments, no strings attached.
Pretty much. The goal is setting that financial floor for everyone. Basic security.
Okay. But the sources you shared aren't entirely positive about UBI, are they? They raise some criticisms.
They definitely do. A big one is the potential for what they call a poverty trap.
A poverty trap. How does the research you shared say that works? What's the mechanism?
Well, the argument centers on how benefits phase out. If you get UBI, but then start working and earning money, your UBI payments might decrease.
Okay, that makes sense.
But the phase-out rate can be incredibly steep. The sources talk about effective marginal tax rates, basically how much you lose in benefits for each extra dollar earned, potentially hitting like 70%.
70%? Wow. So for every extra dollar you earn, you only keep 30 cents.
Effectively, yeah. That's the danger highlighted. It drastically reduces the financial incentive to take a job or work more hours or push for a raise.
Yeah, I can see how that would sap motivation.
What?
Why bother striving if most of the gain disappears?
Exactly. And the sources bring in studies mentioning work cited by organizations like the OECD, suggesting this can really discourage upskilling.
Discourage upskilling. How so?
Well, if the UBI gives you just enough to get by, to be in what the sources call subsistence mode, you might lack the drive, or maybe even the financial breathing room, to invest time, effort in learning new skills or chasing bigger goals.
So going back to that analogy, UBIQ provides the ladders.
Right.
While UBI, the cushions, might maybe unintentionally, make it harder to actually want to climb, keeping people in that subsistence situation.
That's the core contrast the sources draw. But, and this is really important, the material is quick to point out that UBIQ, giving everyone AI tools, isn't some magic bullet either. It comes with its own set of pretty serious potential problems.
Okay, yeah, that's crucial. Let's get into those downsides. The research you provided definitely flags some concerns. There was one perspective that really jumped out at me, Jeff Carter, something about digital fentanyl.
Ah, yes. That's from his blog post on addiction treatment for youth. It's a very, very strong comparison he makes.
Digital fentanyl.
Mm.
What's he arguing there?
He's basically saying that the instant gratification you get from these powerful, free AI tools, getting answers instantly, having content generated for you with almost no effort, it can act like a drug.
Like a drug. How?
It feeds this sort of digital addiction, especially, he warns, for younger users. It triggers that easy reward pathway in the brain.
Hmm. So the sources explain his warning is that tools like ChatGPT could create this kind of
A dopamine-driven loop. That's the phrase used.
right, dopamine loop. You get that quick hit, that reward from the AI doing the work, and that could lead people to rely on it instead of, actually thinking for themselves.
Precisely. The concern highlighted is that it could potentially erode critical thinking skills, maybe even impact mental health long term. The picture painted is pretty stark. AI as digital fentanyl, possibly leading to a generation glued to screens, chasing AI highs instead of real-world growth.
That's
Yeah.
a heavy warning. Definitely something to think about.
It really is, and it's not the only challenge raised about UBIQ in the sources.
Okay, what else?
Well, there's the whole issue of inequality.
Yeah.
Even if the AI tool itself is free, that doesn't mean everyone can use it equally or effectively.
Right. Access isn't the same as equity.
Exactly. You need digital literacy. You need reliable internet access, which isn't universal. You need the time to actually learn how to use these complex tools properly.
So without those things, just giving away the tool might not help much.
Worse, the sources suggest it could actually widen the gap. People who already have resources and skills can leverage the free AI to get even further ahead.
While others without that foundation, maybe without good internet or the right training, get left behind even more.
That's the concern. It makes the UAE experiment interesting, but as the sources imply, it really highlights the need for support systems like training programs to make sure the benefits are shared widely.
Okay, this is complex. Let's try to synthesize this.
Hmm.
We have the potential of UBIQ, the criticisms of UBI, and now these serious risks with UBIQ itself, addiction, inequality. How does this tie back to the bigger picture? You mentioned Kevin Brake earlier.
Absolutely. It loops right back to his point about AI being a real big issue. The sources, taken together, seem to be wrestling with this fundamental question. What do people actually want? Or maybe, what do they need?
And what answer do the sources lean towards?
Well, they point to sentiment, mentioning things seen on platforms like X, suggesting that a lot of people aren't asking for free money just to, well, do nothing. There seems to be a strong desire for tools, for opportunities to improve, to achieve more.
Okay, so that leans towards UBIQ, the latter.
Which does align with that idea, yeah. Giving people tools that amplify their own abilities to learn, create, innovate. That seems to resonate with what the sources suggest people are looking for.
But with major caveats based on those risks we just discussed.
Huge caveats.
Yeah.
The material really stresses the need for guardrails. Strong ones.
Guardrails like,
Things like robust education programs for AI literacy so people understand the tools and their limitations. Maybe even thinking about responsible use, ways to prevent that digital fentanyl effect, though the sources are more implicit on how to limit overuse, just clear on the danger.
and policies to ensure that access is truly equitable. Not just the tool, but the ability to use the tool.
Exactly. Because the warning from these sources is pretty clear. If you roll out UBIQ without these guardrails, you might just trade the problem of poverty for other massive societal issues like addiction or even deeper inequality.
It's a tricky balance. What about scaling this? Could UBIQ work globally?
The potential is there, according to the material, but it would be a monumental undertaking, massive investment needed in infrastructure, internet access everywhere, plus the training component.
But the potential payoff could be huge, redefining empowerment on a global scale.
That's the vision the sources hint at, yes. Amplifying human potential worldwide.
It's a lot to weigh. So, thinking about everything presented in these sources, the promise of UBIQ, the pitfalls of UBI, the serious risks tied to UBIQ like addiction and inequality, how do you, listening right now, see the best path forward?
Yeah, it really makes you question what genuine empowerment means today, doesn't it? Is providing cash enough? Is providing tools enough? Or is it something more complex?
It definitely does.
Oh.
Okay, so to wrap up this deep dive, the source material you shared really highlights this fundamental tension. On one hand, universal basic intelligence free tools aiming to boost creativity and intellect. On the other, universal basic income financial support for basic security.
And the sources do a good job showing both the exciting possibilities and the very real dangers of each approach. Ladders versus cushions, but also the risk of falling off the ladder or getting stuck on the cushion, plus the new risks the ladder itself might introduce.
So maybe the final thought the sources leave us with isn't really about choosing between cash and tools.
Mm.
Perhaps the bigger challenge is figuring out how to foster real empowerment in this age of AI.
Without creating new kinds of dependencies, whether financial or digital, and without making existing societal divides even wider. Finding that careful, nuanced balance seems key.
Definitely a lot to chew on there. If you want to explore some of this further, you could look up that Times of India report on the UAE's ChatGPT initiative, or maybe dig into some OECD research on UBI pilot program effects, which the sources referenced.
Plenty to read up on if this sparked your interest.
We'd love to hear what you think. Share your thoughts, spread the word, and let's keep this conversation going. And hey, please like and leave a comment.